Now we come to the third period, pre-modern and modern China. 4 important discoveries will forge the destiny of China and the world at the invention of printing, the invention of the magnetic compass, gunpowder, and not to forget tea. Before we talk about tea, which would be useful perhaps for you to get over your jet lag, this is printing. And what was printed? That were, of course, first of all, the classics, together with Buddhist scriptures. And this, like in Europe, printing enabled learning, teaching and learning to spread incredibly. So what had been until then a reserved kind of knowledge and expertise of a very small group of people who could afford manuscripts, who could have the time to translate them, now became absolutely distributed everywhere. Printing allowed every Chinese to have access to knowledge and to learning. The classical books were printed in incredible numbers, spread all over the empire, and now every peasant boy could prepare for the examination, creating the famous Chinese success story from rags to riches. That is the theme of so many theater pieces, so many novels. The poor peasant boy who, by sheer hard work, studying at night, under moonlight, learning by heart the classics, then going up for the examinations and to become prime minister of China. Not a millionaire, of course. The magnetic compass and also sailing and shipbuilding technology allowed China to reach out wide over the seas, especially through Southeast Asia and way until Africa and Madagascar. Here you will find these ancient Chinese compasses that allowed navigators to orient themselves to know where they were when they were on the high seas. And then, of course, guns transformed war. There is a kind of story that likes to say that the Chinese invented gunpowder, but they only used it for fireworks. Sure, Chinese fireworks are wonderful, and it's a great gift to humanity. But we have also said that very soon they found also the military use of guns and to transform Chinese warfare tremendously. Even if gun technology remained rather rudimentary, ballistics, rockets were also created in this same Song period. But let's talk about tea. Why is tea such an enormous invention? It's neglected. My friend and mentor, Joseph Needham, introduced the notion of the 4 great Chinese inventions. Of course, there are many, many more. Chinese invented a lot of things. But he forgot, I think, which is one of the most important ones, which is tea. What makes tea so important? Well, coming from Europe, I come from a wine drinking and beer drinking background. And why wine and beer developed was because in sedimentary settlements that started from the Neolithic Revolution, about 10,000 BC in Europe, the problem was the pollution of water. Whenever people congregate on a certain place, they will soil the environment and make water very soon undrinkable. Water becomes dangerous. And people know that. So one way to make water drinkable and disinfect it is to add fermentation, to add alcohol, to ferment it with leaves, making beer, or with the fermented grapes, making wine, and of course mix it with water, as peasants still do in southern France and Italy. So then, of course, it becomes drinkable. But whatever we may like, we have to acknowledge that drinking a lot of alcohol is not so good for your health. and it passes on your next generation. China also was a wine-drinking country. But then one day someone discovered that by boiling water, you made it, you purified it, you killed germs, and you made it drinkable. And by adding to boiled water, of course, tea originally means it's cha, of course, in modern Chinese, it's the southern Chinese pronunciation, tea, of southern Fujian, tea. It was under that name it became known to the merchants of Europe who first went to these parts of China. But tea in those regions really means boiled water, 开水. But you can then add all kinds of herbs, leaves, decoctions that have healing properties, who have thirst-quenching properties, who have stimulating properties, and you can make all kinds of teas. And then tea becomes a culture. It becomes a refined culture. It becomes something that China exports. But in the first place, it becomes a drink, a national drink, that does away with the side effects of alcohol. And one of the reasons China became such a very populous nation is because it started drinking tea. And one of the reasons China became so important and wealthy and expanded so much, first in Southeast Asia and then all over the world, was because of tea. We'll come back to that. Here, as a symbol of Chinese culture and Chinese tea culture, are the most magnificent teacups ever made. They are from the 10th and 11th century. They are from the Northern Song period. They were exported. They were taken by Zen monks from Japan and were used in the Japanese tea ceremony. And in Japan, these bowls from northern Fujian, and they call them in Japan temuku, are until today the most prized national treasures. During this important period of what was already some kind of modern China, who knew already printing, who read already guns, who knew already high sea navigation, a new market economy took hold in China. Excuse me, there's an H missing there. Merchant corporations and craft guilds developed. The Chinese state at that time issued paper money that did not devalue for 300 years. I yet have to say any European state who is capable of doing that. Merchant banks and share-issuing companies flourished. The state, following the Taoist precept of free enterprise and non-intervention, actively encouraged trade. Thus China became the first great manufacturing and trading nation of the world. A place it finds back today. Also during this period, a large Jewish community settled in the capital Kaifeng. Here is the synagogue of Kaifeng. Of course, it's built in Chinese style, and these are one of the famous Kaifeng Torah, the Chinese, the Hebrew Pentateuch, the 5 books. Jews were never discriminated against in China. They were never persecuted. But they so much molded into Chinese culture that except for their own ways of worship and the continuous reading of their holy books, they become just Chinese like anyone else. This great and very refined empire was conquered by Genghis Khan, by the Mongols, who conquered the whole then known civilized world, from Korea unto Poland and the Balkan states. They founded Peking, the place we are now here today. And they founded Peking as the capital of the world. They founded it, they didn't live in it. They didn't want to abandon their yurts. They built the first imperial palace. The place you will visit this afternoon was first built by them. They didn't want to live in it. They just planted their yurts in the middle of these Chinese buildings.